The last season of Daredevil came out like, 3.5 years ago? Even after these few years where we've gotten villains like Green Goblin, Mandarin, and Thanos, it's hard for me to call any of them better than the two best villains from the show, Kingpin and Bullseye. I already talked about Fisk a while ago, but there really isn't enough people that talk about Ben Poindexter. We never got to see him fully become Bullseye in the MCU, but he had one of the best villain backstories ever in Season 3 of Daredevil. Some people don't really get why and how he became a villain because his mental illness isn't exactly the easiest to comprehend, but no worries, here's an explanation. Dex's parents died when he was a little kid, but even when they were alive, they weren't exactly pleasant people. Dex said they were always mad at him, implying a possibly abusive early childhood. After his parents died, he had no one to teach him right from wrong and raise him properly, which can go horribly wrong for someone with borderline personality disorder. People with BPD have symptoms like mood swings, fear of abandonment, impulsive behavior, depression, and paranoia. Dr. Mercer diagnosed Dex with BPD and also said he had psychotic tendencies after he admitted that he killed his coach on purpose. A kid who is that mentally ill and has already committed murder at that age is on a very dangerous path, and Mercer knew that. Dex enjoyed killing. He had urges to commit murder and he acted on them sometimes. He told Mercer about the animals he killed and how much he enjoyed it. He also told Mercer that he didn't feel bad after killing his coach. Mercer tried her best to guide him. She tried to teach him empathy. The phrase she told him to use was, "I'm sorry, that must be really hard." Dex listened to what she said, and as he grew up, he used the phrase, "I'm sorry, that must be really hard," whenever he wanted to express empathy. He didn't actually mean it, but he wanted to express it to at least make it seem like he did. We see this throughout the show. Dex first said, "That's hard, that's really hard," when his fellow agent talks about one of the men that got shot being paralyzed. The second time, he says, "It's hard, it's really hard," when his psychiatrist asks how he's doing. He says, "That's really hard," when Mercer talks about all the goodbyes she had to say due to her cancer. He says, "I'm sorry, that's really hard," when Craig calls the suicide prevention line. He says, "I'm sorry, that must have been really hard," when Julie told him about tearing her ACL. Finally, he says it to Ray just before he kills him. In reality, Dex didn't give a damn about any of those things. I mean, he kinda did give a damn about Mercer dying, but it was more because she was leaving him. He didn't really feel bad about the cancer part. Lack of empathy is a big reason why Dex could slaughter a bunch of people and still not care. The therapist at the start of the season told Dex that he had to process what he had just did after he killed the Albanians. Actually sit down and register that he had taken a human life. Moving past it as if it's normal is not a good thing. The thing is, Dex did process it, he simply did not care. Mercer also taught Dex how to be completely neat and organized. She told him to get a good solid job with a rigid structure. If his life was perfectly in order, Dex was less likely to give in to his violent urges. Stress and imperfections could lead to frustration and anger, which could cause him to lash out. That's why when he closed the door that one time and the picture on his wall went kinda crooked, he immediately opened the door and fixed it. There's also the time he punched a hole in the wall in frustration after he fumbled the bag with Julie at their date. I mean, I would be mad too. He basically just revealed that he had been stalking her for years and she definitely thought he was a weirdo. Dex doesn't exactly have the luxury of lashing out whenever he wants though. He has to keep himself under control. After he punched the wall and wiped the blood on his shirt, he immediately tried to scrub the blood out, but instead he had a breakdown and started destroying his house. He was forced to listen to his old therapy tapes to calm down, and it worked. For the moment. The main thing Dex needed in his life was a North Star. Like I said before, there was no one to teach him right from wrong growing up. As he got older, Dex needed someone to guide him and keep him from becoming a monster. For a good portion of his childhood, that person was Dr. Mercer. She did everything that a parent was supposed to do for him. When she wasn't around, he fell back into his murderous tendencies. Dr. Mercer wouldn't be around forever though, and it wasn't long before she got cancer and didn't have a lot of time left. Dex didn't take the news well, and he admitted to Mercer that he wanted to punish her for leaving him. He had a moment where he almost killed her out of anger. He needed someone to be there for him, and that's where Julie came into the picture. Well, not exactly at that moment. Before working at the Suicide Prevention Center, Dex joined the Army. It was exactly the kind of job that Mercer described when she said he needed a rigid structure. After leaving the Army, Dex worked at a Suicide Prevention Center for a while, and it was there that he first met Julie. Julie was exactly what he wanted to be, a caring and compassionate person. When he got a call from a man named Craig who wanted to shoot himself because of his stepdad, he was originally doing really well with the call until things went left and he suddenly started telling Craig to murder his stepdad. He was able to catch himself just in time though, because he looked at Julie. She was his moral compass. Unfortunately, once Julie stopped working at the Suicide Prevention Center, Dex decided to go full-on creep mode and he started stalking her. He memorized her schedule, monitored her activities, even jogged at the same time and place she did every morning. Dex didn't really think it would be a huge deal since he wasn't interested in her romantically, but literally almost no one else would agree with that. That shit was creepy as hell. Dex soon got a job with the FBI, and that's where Wilson Fisk got to work on him. What Fisk did to Dex is one of the most impressive displays of manipulation we've seen in Marvel. He notices his skill when he saves him from the Albanians and he wants him on his side. The problem is, Dex hated him and he didn't seem like someone you could just buy with money, so he got Dex's files from his lawyer and went through them. First things first, he lied to the FBI about what happened when Dex shot the Albanians. Dex had told him that the Albanians were armed and ready to shoot, when in reality, the Albanians were surrendering and he threw the disassembled pieces of a gun through their necks. Fisk supported Dex's side of the story though, and made sure Dex noticed so that he would believe Fisk was on his side. Then it was time to bring in Julie. He offered her double the money to leave her job and come work at the Presidential Hotel, where Fisk was under house arrest. Dex and Julie eventually reunited, but as Fisk expected, Dex fumbled the bag and basically admitted that he had been stalking her. She got up out of there quick as hell, and now Dex had been rejected by his North Star. This led to the mental breakdown in his apartment that we talked about earlier, where he even went as far as throwing a piece of glass into the neck of Julie in the photo. Listening to the tapes of his old therapist helped though, and kept him from going completely off the rails. Fisk continued to manipulate Dex afterwards. When he came to give him his food, Fisk started monologuing about how similar him and Dex were. I murdered my father at the age of 12. You killed your baseball coach. We're the same, blah, blah, blah. He went on about how Dex shouldn't have to conform to what society wanted him to be. Of course, not being a serial killer should be the basic human path, but Fisk knew how mentally ill Dex was, and he took advantage of it. You know those parents whose kids are outcast and have something that makes them different, and they're all like, oh, I'll accept you either way. That's the role Fisk was trying to play, except being different in this situation is literally being a murderer. Fisk wasn't done with Dex after that. After lying to the FBI to show his quote-unquote support for Dex as they investigated the Albanian shootout, Fisk then leaked the investigation to the press so that the FBI would be forced to put Dex on paid leave. So now Dex doesn't have his moral compass, and he doesn't have the job with the rigid structure that sets him on the straight and narrow path and keeps his life in order. You could imagine what happened next. Yeah, Dex went absolutely nuts. He was originally planning on ending it all and blowing his own brains out, but Fisk stopped it before it could happen and gave him an alternative. He allowed Dex to give in to his violent urges instead of constantly holding them back. With his life already in complete chaos and no one to hold him back, Bullseye was let loose on the New York Bulletin. Even after his murder spree, Dex still wanted to try though, and I think that's the worst part about it all. He never gave up on himself until it just got to the point that he couldn't take it anymore. Dex was able to convince Julie that he wasn't a complete weirdo and that he was stalking her for a legit reason. She agreed to have coffee with him, and as they talked, she agreed to help him get through his overwhelming issues. It seemed like everything was going well again. Dex had his North Star back, except there was just one problem. Yeah, he's still here. As soon as he saw that Dex and Julie had reconciled, he ordered his men to blow her head open and take her phone. Meanwhile, Dex had just learned that he had a chance to get back in the FBI, but he can only be reinstated in 6 months. After the devastating news, he turned to his North Star, the woman who had just agreed to help him. Unfortunately, she was 6 feet deep, and it was Fisk who texted him back, telling him to never speak to her again and then blocking him. That was the final nail in the coffin. Dex was finished trying to control himself for the sake of others, and he was done with all the shit Dr. Mercer taught him how to do for years. Empathy, structure, control, all that goes out the window. He was Bullseye now. Well, technically he was still under Fisk at the moment, but that changed when Matt proved that Fisk killed Julie. Once Dex found the body, he went completely over the edge. Of course he didn't get the name Bullseye on the show, and we didn't get to see him in the costume, but we would have gotten that next season according to the writers and Charlie Cox. At the end of the season, Dex was getting surgery after Fisk blew his back out and paralyzed him. If you didn't know, in the comics, Bullseye gets surgery because he gets severely injured when Matt drops him from a tall height after he killed Elektra. The surgery gave him a partially adamantium skeleton and made him even more formidable, though Daredevil still beat the shit out of him most of the time. I still wonder if they would have made it vibranium in the MCU instead of adamantium, but that doesn't matter now since the MCU can use adamantium if they want to after the Fox deal. Bullseye is one of the best portrayals of mental illness in a villain I've ever seen. A lot of the time it's just, this guy's crazy and he murders people. Shit, that's even how it is for comic Bullseye, at least most of the time. Here we see that Dex is genuinely trying to be good. Even when it looked like he had finally fallen off the deep end, he desperately tried to hold on. It was Fisk's constant manipulation that pushed Dex over the edge and ruined all the progress he made over the years. Bullseye remains a top 3 live-action comic book villain in my opinion. Thanks for watching. I actually like talking about characters like this because they're so interesting to me. Let me know what you thought of Bullseye and Daredevil Season 3. New video coming soon. See you guys next time.